What happens when the HOA president messes with the wrong disabled woman? 3 cop cars, a K-9 unit, and an epic showdown you'll never forget. I stood by, half in shock, half in awe, as Sarah, my Sarah, took control of the situation with a calm that was deadly. Karen was a mess, sputtering and panicking, not understanding that she had pushed my wife one step too far. It was a quiet night in our picture-perfect cul-de-sac. That is, until flashing police lights shattered the calm and turned our driveway into a war zone. 2 police cruisers, a K-9 unit SUV, and the whole damn neighborhood watching as my sister Sarah, a badass in a wheelchair, prepared to tear down Karen Mitchell, the HOA queen, piece by piece. "You thought," Sarah's voice rang out, sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. "You could tow my van, Karen? You really thought because I use a wheelchair I'm some kind of pushover?" Karen, dressed in her fancy Lululemon suit, flapping her hands like a flustered bird, shrieked, "This is an outrage. It's an HOA violation. I have rights. This is private property." But it wasn't just Sarah who was about to teach her a lesson. Officer Miller, the K-9 officer, stepped forward, his German Shepherd by his side, its bark silencing Karen before she could whine any further. "Ma'am," Miller's voice was like steel, "we're not here to argue about your property rights. We're investigating grand theft auto, violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and possibly embezzlement of HOA funds. Your so-called HOA rights don't supersede state and federal law, and they certainly don't cover your personal vendetta. I never imagined our quiet cul-de-sac would become the backdrop for such a dramatic and intense showdown." There were 3 police cars parked on the street, their lights flashing and reflecting off the houses and pavement, casting an urgent glow over the neighborhood. Standing there was a barking K-9 dog, alert and ready, its powerful presence adding weight to the scene. And then there was my wife, Sarah, my Sarah, who despite being disabled was standing firm and strong, laying down the law with a calm but deadly determination. But there was Karen, the new HOA queen bee, caught completely off guard, sputtering like a broken sprinkler. Her face was a mask of pure disbelief and panic, as Sarah, with quiet confidence, methodically dismantled the fragile little empire Karen had built around her. "You seriously thought?" Sarah's voice rang out, cutting sharply through the tension in the air like a razor blade, her usual gentle tone replaced by fierce clarity. "You could tow my specially adapted van, Karen? My legs? Did you really believe that just because I use this wheelchair, I'm some kind of pushover who would let you walk all over me?" Karen, looking sharp in her expensive Lululemon power suit, flapped a hand helplessly as if trying to wave away the reality she was facing. This is an outrage!" she shrieked, her voice cracking under the pressure of the moment. "It was an HOA violation. I have rights. This is private property. You can't just do this." At that moment, the K-9 officer stepped forward, a tall, stoic man named Miller, whom I would soon learn had been mentored by Sarah many years ago. Standing beside him was his German Shepherd, alert and intelligent. The dog let out a sharp, commanding bark that immediately cut through Karen's loud squawks and silenced her completely. The sudden bark seemed to take all the fight out of her. "Ma'am," Officer Miller began, his tone serious and firm, leaving absolutely no room for argument or debate. "We're not here to discuss your petunias or any of your garden concerns. We're here to investigate several potential felonies connected to your actions. We're talking about grand theft auto regarding that van, clear violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and possible embezzlement of HOA funds to cover your personal vendetta against this family." He then gestured toward Sarah, making sure everyone understood. "Your so-called HOA rights do not allow you to trample state and federal laws, nor do they allow you to violate the rights of a decorated, retired police officer." My jaw nearly hit the freshly paved asphalt beneath my feet. Retired police officer? That was news to me. Sarah had always kept her career quiet, especially before her accident. She never spoke much about those years she spent serving on the force. Yet here she was, standing strong in front of Karen, who looked like she'd just been punched in the gut. Karen's face went from a deep red puce to a pale, sickly white, as if all the blood had drained from her body in a second. You might be wondering how it all came to this point. How did what started as a simple fight about HOA membership spiral out of control into flashing police lights, a barking K-9 unit, and threats of serious jail time? Well, grab a chair and listen closely, because this story began about 3 months ago. That's when Karen Mitchell earned her new crown as Queen Karen of the HOA, and with it, a dangerous sense of absolute power that she clearly wasn't ready to handle. Life in Willow Creek was, well, nice. Predictable. Sarah and I had been living in our modest little ranch house for 15 years. It was nothing fancy, but it was home. Sarah had taken an early retirement after an accident on duty that left her dependent on a wheelchair, but her spirit? That was something different. Forged from steel, unbreakable. Our street was quiet, peaceful even. The HOA was a sleepy, almost invisible group that mostly just organized the yearly block party and sent out occasional reminders. We never saw the point of joining. Why would we? We kept our yard neat and tidy, paid our taxes on time, and were good neighbors to everyone around us. Then the election happened. Karen Mitchell showed up, a relative newcomer with a razor-sharp bob haircut and an even sharper tongue to match. Somehow, she took control of the HOA like a shark smelling blood in the water. She lived 3 streets away in one of those giant, ostentatious McMansions that towered over the modest houses like a castle in a quiet village. Apparently, our peaceful little anarchy, the freedom to live without her interference, offended her deeply. "Mr. Henderson, isn't it?" Karen said cheerfully one Saturday morning, but her smile didn't quite reach her cold, calculating eyes. It felt less like a friendly greeting and more like a veiled warning, a message that she was here to assert control. I straightened up from washing my hands, wiping the soap suds off carefully with a rag. "That's me," I replied calmly, keeping my tone neutral and measured. "And you're Mrs. Mitchell, I presume? The new HOA president?" She nodded with a sense of pride, puffing out her chest just slightly, as if she already saw herself as the ruler of the neighborhood. "Indeed," she said firmly. "I'm just doing a preliminary survey of the neighborhood. You could say I'm making a list." "A list of what?" I asked, a little uneasy now, sensing where this might lead but wanting to hear her out. "Compliance, Mr. Henderson," she said with a sharp tone. "And from what I see in the outdated records, your household is not registered as a member of the Homeowners Association." I let out a soft laugh, trying to keep things light. "No, we never really saw the need. Everything has always been fine without it." Karen's smile tightened, slowly turning into something almost like a smirk, as if she knew more than she was letting on. "Well, things are changing for the better, Mr. Henderson. For the entire community." She paused, emphasizing her next words carefully. "Membership means everyone contributes to our shared quality of life." Then, almost casually, she added, "It's just $200 a year. You can find the sign-up forms on the community website." "We'll think about it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and neutral, not wanting to cause any conflict right then. "Don't think too long," she warned, lowering her voice just a notch to make it sound serious, almost threatening. "Non-participation can lead to complications. We're aiming for 100% compliance. It looks better for property values, you understand." A week later, the first letter showed up in our mailbox. It came in a bright yellow envelope that stood out immediately. On the front, it boldly said, "Official HOA Communique," in all capital letters. "What's this nonsense?" Sarah grumbled, wheeling herself closer to the kitchen table as I carefully tore open the envelope. I unfolded the letter and began to read aloud. "Dear resident, it has come to our attention that you are not currently a member in good standing with the Willow Creek HOA. Failure to register and remit dues within 30 days will result in a review of your property's adherence to all community bylaws." I stopped and looked up at Sarah. What the hell does that even mean? Sarah snorted, clearly annoyed. It means Karen's on a power trip, Mark. We're not joining. It's always been voluntary, and it always should be. I grabbed my phone and tried calling Karen right away. The call went straight to voicemail. I left a message, but never got a call back. Then I sent her an email explaining that we weren't interested in joining but wanted to talk it through. Still, no reply. At the next HOA meeting, which was poorly attended and held in Karen's enormous living room, I tried to bring up the letter and our concerns. I hoped to clear the air or at least get some answers, but things didn't go as planned. Mrs. Mitchell, I said, standing up to make sure I had her full attention. I want to talk about the membership. Before I could finish, Karen cut me off with a quick wave of her hand, clearly not interested in hearing what I had to say. Mr. Henderson, this isn't the place for individual complaints or grievances, she said coldly. The rules are very clear. You either join the HOA or you'll be found in non-compliance. She paused to make sure her words hit hard. Then, with a sharp glance, she looked past me and toward Sarah's van, which was parked legally in our driveway and clearly visible through the big bay window of our house. And non-compliant properties, she said slowly, drawing out the words, especially those with conspicuous vehicles, will be dealt with. One of her new board members, a thin, weaselly man named Peterson, quickly jumped in to support her. She's right, you know, he said with a sly smile. That big van of yours is kind of an eyesore. It takes up a lot of space and doesn't look good. My blood started to boil. I clenched my fists, but kept my voice steady and low, filled with quiet anger. That van is a lifeline for my wife, I said firmly. It's specially adapted to fit her wheelchair, and it's parked on my own property. Karen just sniffed dismissively, acting like she didn't care at all. All properties in Willow Creek have to follow the HOA's aesthetic standards, Mr. Henderson. Whether you're a member or not, consider this your first informal warning about that vehicle. It was clear to me right then that this wasn't about helping the community or maintaining appearances. This was about control. And Sarah's van, the one thing that symbolized her freedom and independence, had become Karen's main target. The next few weeks were nothing short of a masterclass in petty tyranny. Karen acted like a ruthless fiscal vampire, draining both our joy and our money with a constant stream of fines and penalties. Each letter that arrived in the mail brought a new charge or complaint, no matter how small or ridiculous. I challenged every single fine, writing polite but firm registered letters in response. In those letters, I carefully cited the original, much more lenient HOA bylaws that we had received when we first moved into the neighborhood. But no matter how clear or reasonable my responses were, they were simply ignored. One evening, Sarah was staring at yet another fine, a $50 charge, because according to the HOA, a squirrel had knocked over our trash can, even though it was an HOA-approved model and had been properly placed for pickup. "She's trying to bleed us dry, Mark," Sarah said, her voice full of frustration and anger. "She thinks if she can just make life miserable enough for us, we'll either cave in and pay her stupid fees, or we'll pack up and leave." I growled in response, my own anger rising. "She's got another thing coming," I said, determined to fight back no matter what. But the constant stress was wearing both of us down. Every time Sarah had a doctor's appointment, it felt like an ordeal, not just because of her condition, but because we were always worried Karen would find some new excuse to fine us or create trouble related to the van. It was like living under a dark cloud, constantly waiting for the next attack. Then came the ultimatum. Another bright yellow envelope arrived, standing out among the usual mail. I grabbed it with a mix of dread and anger, knowing it wouldn't bring any good news. My hands trembled slightly as I tore it open and began to read aloud. "Final notice," I said, clenching my fists to keep calm. "Regarding the oversized, non-standard vehicle parked at 12 Willow Lane. This vehicle is in violation of Bylaw 7, subsection C, paragraph 2. Vehicles primarily used for commercial purposes or those exceeding standard passenger vehicle dimensions are prohibited from long-term street or driveway parking. You have 48 hours to remove the vehicle from public view or it will be towed at the owner's expense. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief and she exclaimed, "Commercial? Standard dimensions? It's a modified passenger van, for crying out loud, and it's parked in our driveway. She just made that rule up to get us." I couldn't argue with her. I had spent hours going over the bylaws Karen had proudly posted online after she took over the HOA presidency. There was no such clause a month ago. It was a completely new, made-up rule designed to target us. The next day, I spent nearly the whole day on the phone trying to get answers. I called Karen directly, but it went straight to voicemail. Then I tried the HOA's so-called hotline, only to be greeted by a recorded message of Karen's own voice telling me to check the website for information. Frustrated, I even called the city offices, hoping for some support or guidance. The city officials told me that HOA disputes involving private property were civil matters and only involved the police if a law had been broken. Later that evening, Sarah's voice was quiet and weak as she asked, "What are we going to do, Mark?" The fight had taken a huge toll on her, wearing down her strength. I looked at her, feeling helpless and uncertain. "I don't know, honey," I admitted softly. "I just don't know." The next morning, the quiet was shattered by the loud rumble of a diesel engine and the unmistakable thump-clank of a tow truck deploying its heavy metal lift. The noise jolted us out of our peaceful coffee routine. We both rushed to the window, hearts pounding. There it was, a greasy, worn-down tow truck with "Quick Tow" boldly painted on its side, slowly backing up to Sarah's van. "No!" I yelled, throwing open the front door while still in my pajamas. "You can't do that! That van is on private property!" The tow truck driver, a big, burly man wearing stained overalls and a face full of apathy, barely spared me a glance. "Got an order from the HOA, pal, signed and sealed." He lazily gestured with his grimy thumb toward Karen Mitchell, who was standing nearby on the sidewalk, arms crossed and a smug smirk plastered on her face as she watched her plan unfold. "Karen, you can't!" Sarah pleaded, maneuvering her wheelchair quickly up the porch steps, her voice shaking. "I need that van. I have a doctor's appointment today." Karen's smile grew wider, colder. "Should have thought about that before you decided to ignore the community regulations, Mrs. Henderson. Maybe a taxi would work for you, or perhaps it's finally time to consider joining the HOA. We do offer discounts on approved vehicle parking for our members." I lunged toward the driver, desperate to stop him, but he was already hooking the van up to the tow truck's lift. "I'm calling the police," I shouted, filled with rage. "Go right ahead," Karen said with fake sympathy dripping from her voice. "They'll tell you the same thing. This is an HOA matter." And just like that, with the groan of hydraulics and the screech of tires, Sarah's lifeline, her independence, was ripped away, dragged down the street. Sarah let out a choked sob, her face buried in her hands. It was a sound full of pain and helplessness. That was the moment something inside me snapped. But what truly told me the fight was just beginning was the fierce, cold light of fury shining in Sarah's tear-filled eyes. The war had officially begun. The hours after they towed the van were a blur of impotent rage and bureaucratic brick walls. Quick Tow, when I finally got through, quoted an astronomical impound fee, plus a daily storage charge that would bankrupt us in a week. They claimed they were just following orders from the HOA. I confronted Karen again, cornering her as she was getting into her Lexus. "You malicious witch!" I seethed, trying to keep my voice down but failing. "You know Sarah needs that van. This is discrimination." Karen actually laughed. "Discrimination, Mr. Henderson. Don't be so dramatic. It's called enforcing the rules, something you clearly don't understand. Pay your fines, join the HOA, and perhaps we can discuss a probationary return of your vehicle, provided it's stored in your garage, of course." "It doesn't fit in the garage with the wheelchair lift," I almost screamed. Then that's your problem, isn't it? She replied coolly and drove off. I returned home, defeated, to find Sarah strangely calm. The tears were gone. In their place was a chilling resolve I hadn't seen since before her accident, back when she wore a badge. "Mark," she said, her voice quiet but firm as steel. "Stop trying to reason with that monster. You can't reason with a rabid dog. You call animal control." I stared at her. "What are you talking about, honey?" She picked up her phone with steady hands. "I think it's time I made a few calls to some old friends," she said quietly. "People who know exactly what happens when bullies in power forget who they really work for." Her fingers, which were usually a little stiff and slow because of her condition, moved quickly and skillfully across the phone screen. She made 3 calls in a row. I only caught pieces of the conversations because her voice was low, calm, and professional. "Miller?" "Yeah, it's Sarah. Sarah Reynolds. It's been a long time. Listen, I've got a situation here in Willow Creek. The HOA president, her name's Karen Mitchell. She illegally towed my ADA-compliant vehicle. Yes, it's properly marked and everything. No, the local police say it's a civil matter. That's why I'm calling you. I think there's more going on than just a simple tow. Some financial irregularities with the tow company she's using exclusively. Quick Tow." "Uh-huh. You think you could help?" "Really? With Bailey? Oh, he'll love this." She paused for a moment, listening to the reply. A faint, almost predatory smile appeared on her lips. "Okay, send them over. And Miller? Tell Bailey I said hi, and that I've got his favorite brand of dog biscuits waiting for him." She hung up and looked at me, her eyes no longer tired or worn out. Instead, there was a bright spark, a look I hadn't seen in a long time. It was the same look she used to get right before a major bust, before she caught the bad guys. "Who's Bailey?" I asked, my heart starting to race with a mix of hope and nervousness. Sarah winked at me. "Bailey, my dear Mark, is a 4-legged officer of the law. He's got a nose for trouble and a bite that's far worse than Karen Mitchell's bark. They're on their way now. And I have a feeling Karen's reign is about to come to a very sudden, very loud, and very public end." My jaw tightened. The storm wasn't just coming anymore. Sarah had just called down the thunder and lightning itself. We didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour after Sarah's calls, the distant wail of sirens began to grow, Dopplering closer and closer. I saw Karen out on her lawn, preening over her rose bushes, probably relishing her triumph. The first cruiser turned onto our street, then the second, and then the K9 unit. They didn't just pull up, they arrived, lights blazing, a clear statement. Officer Miller, tall and imposing, a man who clearly ate nails for breakfast, led the way. Beside him was the K9 handler and Bailey, the German shepherd, every inch the professional. And then another officer helped Sarah from the passenger seat of Miller's cruiser into her own wheelchair, which they'd apparently picked up from our house en route. This was it, the scene I opened with. Sarah, my incredible wife, sat there, the queen on her wheeled throne, facing down the neighborhood tyrant. "You seriously thought," Sarah's voice resonated, "you could tow my specially adapted van, Karen? My legs? You actually believed that because I use this chair I'm some kind of pushover?" Karen stammered. This is an outrage. It was an HOA violation. I have rights. This is private property." Officer Miller's voice was like gravel. "Ma'am, we're here investigating several potential felonies. We're talking grand theft auto regarding that van, clear violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and possibly embezzlement of HOA funds to cover your little vendetta." He nodded at Sarah. "Your HOA rights don't get to trample state and federal law, nor the rights of a decorated retired police officer." The gasps from the neighbors were audible. Peterson, Karen's weaselly bored crony, who'd been hovering near her prize-winning azaleas, suddenly looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him. "Retired officer?" Karen squeaked, her eyes wide with dawning horror. Sarah gave a grim nod. 15 years with the force, Karen. K-9 narcotics unit, then robbery homicide until my accident. I know the law, intimately, and you, darling, just broke about 6 of them. Officer Miller produced a warrant. Karen Mitchell, we have a warrant to search your home and seize all HOA financial records, specifically pertaining to payments made to QuickTow and any other unverified expenditures. Bailey, as if on cue, let out another booming bark, straining. Lightly at his leash, his intelligent eyes fixed on Karen. She physically recoiled. "QuickTow," Karen blustered, trying to regain some composure. "They're a legitimate business." "Funny thing about QuickTow," Miller said, his eyes narrowing. "It's owned by a shell corporation, which is in turn owned by your brother-in-law, Frank Peterson. And we've just had a very interesting chat with the driver who towed Mrs. Henderson's van. Seems he was paid a hefty cash bonus directly from the HOA emergency fund, authorized by you for this specific tow. An emergency fund that, according to your own bylaws, requires full board approval for withdrawals over $500. Approval you forged." Karen's face crumpled in front of us, the fierce queen bee suddenly deflating like a popped balloon. The confidence and arrogance she had worn so proudly melted away, replaced by fear and desperation. But the bylaws," she wailed, her voice cracking as she tried to cling to whatever authority she thought she still had. Sarah stood her ground, calm and steady, her voice cold and clear. "Your selectively enforced, recently fabricated bylaws mean nothing when faced with real criminal statutes, Mrs. Mitchell. You targeted me personally. You abused your power to harass and intimidate. You committed fraud. And you did it all simply because I refused to pay your petty $200 fee." As officers moved in to escort a now sobbing Karen toward a police cruiser, her once powerful Lululemon suit looked oddly out of place, powerless and worn down just like her. Officer Miller turned to Sarah with a small smile. "The van's already on its way back to you, Sarah. Tow fees have been waived." The manager at QuickTow suddenly got very cooperative once he realized he's facing charges for aiding and abetting. Then Miller looked at me and said quietly, "Your wife is one hell of a woman, Mr. Henderson." I just nodded, unable to find words. My chest swelled with pride as I wrapped an arm gently around Sarah's shoulders. She leaned into me, a small, tired smile playing on her lips. The moral reward? Oh, it was sweet indeed. Karen Mitchell was officially charged. Her crooked HOA empire crumbled overnight. The weaselly board members quickly resigned in disgrace. Our neighborhood finally got a chance to elect people who cared about building a real community, not about control and power. Sarah's van was back in our driveway by lunchtime, shining brightly as if it knew it had been a true hero in this fight. But the very best part? Seeing the look on Karen's face when she finally understood that she hadn't just messed with a woman in a wheelchair. She had crossed a seasoned law enforcement veteran, someone who still had powerful friends in very high and very effective places. And sometimes, those friends come on 4 legs with sharp noses and a very loud bark.